right, so Morgan, do you want to hear about the cases that were tied to Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah.
Now,
Of course there's murder cases.
Of course, but I want to clarify and say that, it was a very popular game at the time, especially in the 80s. A lot of people played it. Most people that played it didn't kill people.
No.
It is not something we're trying to blame for anybody dying. It is not something that I see as bad. It's fun. It's fantasy. I just want to make it clear I'm not trying to imply that it's in any way causing people to murder people.
No, it is not. Those are the few whack jobs out there. So
You're right. So one of the cases I want to talk about is in North Carolina in 1988. There was a man named Christopher Pritchard, and he learned that his stepfather, Leith von Stein, which seems like a very Dungeons and Dragons name, by the way.
it's very Viking.
Yeah, Leith von Stein. Anyway, he had a decent amount of money, and if he died, it would go to Chris. And so Chris was like, yeah, I want to inherit this money. So he had this plan, and he convinced two of his friends, Neil Henderson and James Upchurch, to assist him. And so he was a student at North Carolina State University, and him and his friends used to go get high, and they would use real weapons to kind of reenact Dungeons and Dragons. Also not that bad. If you're doing it in a safe way, you're just having fun, fantasy. But he got really into it. And they would sort of recreate these situations in real life. And not violently, but just playing out scenarios.
Yes, like they were deep into the...
Yeah, really deep into it. So Pritchard learned about the money. He enlisted the help of his friends, and he promised to share the money with them that he would get if they would help him kill his stepfather and his mom, Bonnie. Now, he was not directly involved in the attack. He was thought, I'm going to be smart about it. I'm going to stay on campus.
Two idiots do this.
Yeah, he's like, I'm going to stay on campus. I'll establish an alibi. So on July 25th of 1988, Neil Henderson drove Upchurch to...
I remember this.
Yeah, the Von Stein home, which was about 108 miles away from the campus. And once there, Upchurch entered the home and attacked the couple while they were sleeping. During the attack, Leith was killed, but Bonnie managed to survive and got help. And Chris's sister Angela said that she actually slept through the entire thing. So she was in the home, she was not harmed, she slept through it. Soon after this, all three of the young men were arrested with charges related to the crime.
How'd they kill them?
I don't know exactly.
Okay.
I think with a weapon, but maybe a gun. I'm not sure.
Remember.
I did not find that info, but I didn't deep dive either, I'll just say. So in January of 1990, Pritchard admitted that he had masterminded the plan, and Henderson took a plea deal. So Upchurch was charged with first-degree murder, to which he pled not guilty.
Right.
But the other two both testified against him in court, because he was the one that actually went in there and
Did it.
yeah. He was the one acting it out. So all three of them were sentenced to jail, with Neil Henderson being paroled in 2000, and Christopher Pritchard was paroled in 2007. And he's now a born-again Christian, and surprisingly, his mom, Bonnie, has stood behind him the entire time. Like, she has always, even though he masterminded an attack against her that was going to kill her, she stood behind him, and apparently today they have a really close relationship still.
Mother's love, holy.
Yeah, and like I said, he's born-again Christian, that he may have found like some reform, realized the error of his ways. At that age, your brain is not fully developed, maybe made some really poor choices, hopefully learned from it.
He made some really poor choices.
Really poor. Yeah, I don't want to diminish the poor choices that he made, because it resulted in his stepfather's death.
Maybe she didn't like him either.
Yeah, so this crime has been called the Dungeons and Dragons murder, even though Dungeons and Dragons is not directly related to the crime itself, but they were known to play it and be really into it. But the motive here seems to be greed, not fantasy or ritual.
I'm going to say something here, and I hope it's not taken offensively, but remember how Marilyn Manson got the blame for Columbine and stuff back in the day?
Yeah, all sorts of things. No,
yeah, all
it's
sorts
not.
of things. No.
All right, so now we're going to go on to another murder that was associated with Dungeons and Dragons, and that was the strangulation of 18-year-old Mary Towan in April of 1984 in St. Louis, Missouri. So she was killed by 19-year-old Darren Lee Molitor and Ronald Adcox. I'm not sure how old he was. I think similar age. So, as part of the defense, they said that Dungeons and Dragons was a part of the defense that they were not allowed to bring into the defense. So they tried to throw it out as a defense, and they said, no, you can't bring it in.
You can't blame the game.
Yeah, he claimed that the way the game is played as a role-playing game, it gets into your mind, and he considers it dangerous. So he was trying to put the blame on the game.
He is chaotic evil.
Yeah, in this case, he claimed that the pair had, so this is Molitor talking, the pair had tied up the young woman and put an athletic bandage around her throat, but had intended to play with her mind. So she was a young woman, she was throwing a Friday the 13th party, they were all into Dungeons and Dragons, and they didn't mean to kill her is what he said, but that in the night...
Okay over here?
Oh, yes. Thank you.
They were, drinking, doing some drugs, and they just kind of had this idea, tie her up and, mess with her mind. And they said that they had been desensitized by Dungeons and Dragons to the point where it just mixed up fantasy and reality, and she ended up having been killed.
Again.
But it was accidental.
That is not a valid defense.
No, it is not. I would say maybe, whatever substance they were using caused more of a change in their mind at the time, or they were not in tune with reality, but I wouldn't necessarily blame.
I think probably what happened was the effects of the drugs was they may have thought that they were just joking with this girl, putting a Band-Aid around her neck and not realizing, ooh, that's a little too tight.
Right. And either way, that's not a good joke to play on someone.
No.
Scaring someone like that is not cool.
No.
So, in the end, both of them were sentenced to life in prison, and then Adcox ended up being convicted of murdering another inmate in 1991 by strangling him with a cord.
Okay.
And then he was later charged with conspiracy to murder another inmate. So, this guy, I have a feeling, would have been committing crimes regardless of a game. So, the final case is one that happened in Eugene, Oregon. It was in 1988, so again, all these were happened in the 80s when it was really, really big. Dungeons and Dragons was everywhere. It was kind of referenced as like a real-life Stranger Things case, but 17-year-old John Jones met 20-year-old Jason Rose at a mall in Oregon. And now John was kind of described as a loner kid. He felt like he didn't fit in with anybody, he didn't have any friends, and he really wanted to have friends and be accepted by other people. And he met Jason, and he felt like he just clicked, and they finally found someone he could connect with. And he was, Jason was described as more of a leader, and John was described as a follower, and he would do anything to keep this friendship.
I have to make this clear, I don't think this was the John Jones that I was engaged to, was it? No.
Oregon? No. In the 80s?
Maybe,
No.
Maybe. I'm trying to think. No.
No, we killed all the people you were engaged to.
Right.
I mean, they just disappeared and left.
Yep. I'm the problem, so.
Yep. Yeah, she drives men away. Has nothing to do with them screwing her over and her sister and her taking revenge. Okay.
Yep. So anyways, Eugene, Oregon, the 80s.
Yes.
Here we go.
They clicked, they became friends, and he just never wanted to let him down. He wanted to do anything to impress this guy. And the two shared an interest in Dungeons and Dragons, but Jason also went on to teach John about things like vampirism and sacrifices. So a little bit more on the darker side of things. And Jason was obsessed with his character from Dungeons and Dragons called Arya and worshipped him. And so they kind of took him as like their god figure. And Jason was described as being really charismatic, someone that others wanted to follow, but he really struggled to maintain friendships with other people. He had a lot of acquaintances, but he was known for like kind of going after them and attacking them if he'd get upset. And so he really didn't have many close friends besides John, because he would always just lash out and chase people away. So when John started hanging out with Jason, he was really happy to have a friend, but he didn't realize at the time how controlling Jason was. Jason wanted to know where he was all the time, who he was talking to. He wanted to control his friendships, who he talked to, and basically had a lot of control over his life in general. And Jason was also known for, and a trigger warning here, for animal abuse. He was known for sacrificing animals. He claimed to have a vial of goat blood, and neighborhood pets were starting to disappear.
That's not right.
No, it isn't. And this kind of led to deeper fantasies of human sacrifice. And they had these runes, and they said, okay, well, the runes will tell us who the right person is to kill and when the right time is, and then we're going to sacrifice that person to Arya.
It's kind of like Slender Man here. Like,
Yeah, there's definitely some connections. So, this is where 19-year-old Melissa Meyer comes into the story. She moved from Seattle to Eugene, Oregon, and she met John, and they developed a really close friendship at the time. So, she really trusted him. She became dependent on him as a confidant. She really, really trusted him. It was the person she would go to. And Jason and John thought the easiest thing to do would be to lure someone that they actually knew and kill, because they would be able to get this person away from other people. So they decided her. And some people have said that she had made Jason upset by being friends with someone that he considered an enemy. I don't know. But on May 30th of 1988, the two lured Melissa into a campsite in the woods to kill her. They were just hanging out there. Eventually, the men attacked her. Melissa turned to John and begged him for help.
Whoa.
And while she was distracted doing this, Jason came up behind her and put her in a chokehold, like a sleeper hold. She managed to say, "I can't breathe." And he said, "Oh, well, if you couldn't breathe, then you wouldn't be asking for help here." And he held it, and he said he held it for about 15 to 20 minutes as she went limp in his arms.
Oh.
That's what he estimated. All right, then Jason started chanting prayers to Ariak, and they hacked at her with a dull machete.
Oh my God.
Yes, but then that didn't work because it was dull, so she came back to consciousness after this. And they told her that she was a black witch and that she should feel honored to be their sacrifice. Then they took an 8-foot-long homemade spear, put it over her neck, and each of them stood on a side of it for, they said, about 15 to 20 minutes as they talked about what the runes had told them, until she finally died. And when she dead, and they made sure, they stood on there another 5 minutes just to make sure. Then they staged the body to look like a sexual assault. They took off her clothes and they threw her body somewhere in the woods, and they left. And so what actually happened was, later the two of them reenacted the whole scene for police. It's on camera with a mannequin to show all of the things they had said and done. And you can look up this video of them reenacting it. It is online if you search for it. But you can watch their reenactment of what happened. They show no remorse. They don't show any compassion, no empathy, no feeling. They go back and forth on the things they said and to her and how they did everything. But they had killed her as part of a ritual sacrifice, and then the pair were apprehended a few days later in a motel in Arizona. John Jones was sentenced to life in prison and was released in June 30th of 2012. And Jason Rose was first sentenced to death, but it was later resentenced to life in prison. So those are the 3 cases that were related to Dungeons and Dragons. And again, I don't blame the game, I blame the people.